Oh man, it's just frustrating. I made this video twice and it just doesn't upload for some reason. But thanks for your response. I want to start by quoting something Dawkins said in River Out of Eden. He said, "Life is just bytes and bytes and bytes of digital information. Um, it is not a metaphor. It is the plain truth." So DNA is information, and Dawkins has reduced all of evolution to the information in the DNA, ignoring the organism as a whole, the organism's social group, the environment in relation to that social group and the organism. He doesn't think there's any selection operating on those levels. He thinks it's all the genes, the self-replicating, selfish genes. This isn't really, I don't even think this is mainstream within evolutionary biology today. I think there's um, been a big shift over to developmental systems theory in trying to understand evolution more as um, seeing the context of the genes in the cell, in the organism as a whole, in the social group, in the environment. All of these levels play a role in evolution. There's coevolution between organism and environment. It's not as though the environment is just pre-given and selects and shapes the organism, which has to adapt to it. The organism is changing the environment, so there's a two-way process. Dawkins has ignored all of that, reduced it only to information in genes. And Dawkins' view may be still most popular um, in the public sphere, but I think evolutionary biology has left his metaphor behind. Um, but be that as it may, let's talk about why I think it's incorrect to see information as in the genes. First of all, the word gene is a bit of an abstraction. Um, there's no like section of genetic code um, that codes for any specific trait in organisms, independent of the context and the environment, the place, the particular cell that DNA is in the body or whatever. There's no one-to-one relationship there. There, Dawkins will talk about DNA as self-replicating. It's not self-replicating. It requires the machinery of the cell to perform its transcription and translation. It needs proteins already to exist prior to it being able to reproduce or replicate itself. Um, so, and because it's embedded in the cell, and the context of the cell is always changing, the environment it's embedded within is always changing. We couldn't say that there is any information in the DNA independent of that context, because for example, if the temperature is different surrounding the cell, then when the DNA has transcribed itself into RNA and the RNA is being translated into a protein, the rate at which the protein is spit out of the ribosome determines how the protein will then fold up in three-dimensional space. Um, if it's a cooler environment, it'll fold differently than if it's a warmer environment. And the cell's metabolism is trying to maintain constant homeostasis, temperature-wise, but there's all these other factors, is what I'm trying to say, involved in what a strain of nucleic acids becomes as a protein and then as a trait in an organism. It's not like this linear informational process where you're just transferring what's embedded already in the DNA independent of its environment into the phenotype of the organism. It's a lot more complicated than that, and outside of the cell, the DNA is absolutely meaningless. It can't do anything. It contains no information. The information, if there is any, if you want to talk about information at all, it's spread throughout the cell, um, the body, if it's a multicellular organism, the environment that the cells are contained within. Information is that network of relationships. It's not contained in the DNA. Um, so that's Dawkins. Now Dennett is doing something similar by taking an abstraction um, information and seeing that as the mind. Basically, the mind is a computer in your skull. Um, but see, for me, the mind is experience. It's what I feel. It's what I'm allows me to be aware of the world. It's not these abstract bits of information. Um, you know, we can represent a lot of the physical world in terms of bits of information. We can produce replicas, digital replicas of anything by transforming the physical object into some type of informational structure. But when it comes to experience and consciousness, we're not talking about some physical object. We're talking about a subject. And it's not that I think consciousness is separate from the body. That's one of the reasons I'm arguing against Dennett's view. He's saying that there is the software and the hardware, the mind and the matter, and that there's two separate things. When really, if you want to use this metaphor on an organism like myself, like I've said in my other videos, the software and the hardware are the same thing. It's not that the software is reducible to the hardware, because the hardware is just as much reducible to the software. Because there's this ongoing self-producing process, self-organizing process that is living, and is also experience and consciousness. Consciousness arises out of that same process that allows my body to maintain itself. So there's no separation, there's no dualism between the software and the hardware. And it may just come down to a difference in intuition between Dennett and myself, and other people that agree or disagree with me or Dennett. I don't think that that there's a soul that floats around inside the body that gives us our experience and our ideas and thoughts and everything. I'm not claiming that there's something mysterious going on that we can't understand. I just don't know that we can understand it reductively. I don't think we can understand it in terms of bits of information. We have to, if we want to understand consciousness or experience, we have to explore it on its own terms, meaning, with phenomenology, with some form of Buddhist contemplative meditation, with psychedelic drugs. If you want to understand consciousness, then explore consciousness. Don't explore, computer codes, or, it's not that I don't think AI is a fruitful field of research. I just don't think that ultimately it's a matter of whether or not we can make a conscious computer that's going to determine whether AI is possible. It's whether or not we as human subjects are willing to accept a computer as conscious into our intersubjective circle. So it's more, what are we willing to attribute to the computer than it is, what does the computer actually have? So if we ever do have AI, it'll be more a transformation of our human understanding of what it means to be conscious or alive than it will be something that we have created, externally to that social understanding. So, but I'm skeptical that we could ever, using any type of computing technology that we know of today, create conscious experience in some, silicon medium, microchip medium. And it's just an intuition that I have. I can't explain it more than that I see organisms and machines as different, fundamentally different. Organisms grow, each of their parts are dependent on every other part in a continual process. You could take a computer apart and put it back together again, and it'll just work just fine. You can't do that with an organism and, start taking organs out and then trying to sew them back together. It's dead way before you ever, get to sewing those organs back together. So the fact that I grow, that I develop, that I evolve, and have always been embedded in this world, whereas a machine or a computer is designed from the outside by an intelligent agent, I think is important to remember that there's a huge difference there. So I guess I'll leave it at that to avoid going over time. But thanks for your response, and let me know if I left anything out. I'm sure I did, but we can continue the conversation definitely. So take it easy.